Good morning,
Thank you.
Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, sir, Honorable former Vice Chancellor, University of Mumbai, and today's esteemed keynote speaker, Shri Mahbubul Haq, sir, Honorable Chancellor, University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya. Participants of the program, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya, we would like to welcome all to the fourth lecture of the USTM webinar lecture series, organized to discuss the various aspects, issues and challenges in higher education during and post-COVID-19, and especially the role of universities in research, development and innovation. Before we begin, I would like to request all the participants to kindly mute their audio systems and microphones. During the session, participants can post their queries in the chat box and the question answer box. Also, selected queries will be taken up for question answers, taking into account the time factor. We'd also request all the participants to kindly fill the feedback form. The link of the feedback form will be shared during this session at the end of this session, and e-certificate will be issued to the participants who had submitted the feedback forms only. Feedback forms are to be submitted by tonight, midnight tonight. I would now like to request Dr. Alpana Chaudhary, Director, Students Affairs, USTM, to kindly present the welcome address. Alpana.
Good morning, one and all. I welcome Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, the Honorable former Vice Chancellor of Mumbai University, as today's esteemed speaker of the lecture series, Role of Universities in Research and Innovation During COVID-19. I welcome all the participants and my colleagues who have joined this live session. Due to this pandemic, there is a big challenge in front of researchers across the country. And we are sure that today's deliberation by our esteemed distinguished speaker, Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, will give a new direction to the researchers in finding out strategies to meet these challenges. Once again, we welcome Professor Sanjay Deshmukh to this introduction and request him to kindly start his speech. Sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we allow Sanjay Deshmukh sir to speak, I think there are few things everybody knows of Sanjay Deshmukh sir, but still I would like to elaborate few points. As we know, ladies and gentlemen, we have today with us Professor Sanjay Deshmukh sir, one of India's widely acknowledged life scientists and an academic thought leaders in higher education. Professor Deshmukh sir has served as the youngest ever Vice Chancellor of the 162-year-old University of Mumbai, encompassing over 800 affiliated colleges with over 8 lakh students. He has brought transparency in the system and has built a global best practices with a view on skilling and increasing employability. Currently, sir is the Professor of Life Science at the University of Mumbai, with a research experience at both national and international level, spanning over 50 countries. Sir is the only faculty of the university who is recognized as a PhD guide in 5 subjects. He is associated with many organizations of national and international repute, including USTM. He is our mentor, he is our guide, and he is providing us strong strategic leadership in global environment and development issues. We are indeed honored, sir, that you have given your consent to address today's lecture series. Sir, the session is yours now.
Thank you very much, Mahizabin madam. I also would like to thank Alpana madam for the kind initiation of this particular theme as well as the event. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude and thanks to the Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Mahbubul Haq, for his kindness in including me as a part of this oration series, which I'm sure is going to be one of the very exciting events of this university. And it will reach not only within India, but abroad, where people would be watching this with much interest. I am also honored to follow on the earlier speakers who have been very, very eminent and visionary leaders, not only in the academia, but also in their own life. And fortunately, I know some of the speakers of this event, and the earlier speakers have been Professor Ved Prakash, the former chairman of UGC, as well as the former chairman of UPSC, Dr. Agrawal, and the former chairman of AICTE, Professor Mantha. They have given a fantastic start to this oration series, and now the responsibility lies on me to ensure that the justification of my inclusion in the list is properly made. Thank you very much, everybody. I would also like to acknowledge the kind presence of Honorable Vice Chancellor of USTM, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Honorable Registrar, Honorable Deans of various faculty, Honorable faculty members, both teaching and non-teaching, as well as very dynamic students of USTM whom I have interacted a few times. Besides those, all the important dignitaries and the visitors, as well as the viewers of this important event, I would like to welcome them and thank you very much for their presence. As all of us know that the topic of my lecture, which has been already announced, and we have been able to see the title, which basically deals with the role of universities in research, development, and innovation. Just for a second, I would like to check with the organizers whether they are able to see the presentation.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. This particular theme has been discussed time and again, and particularly in the 21st century, when we are talking about education to the masses. The main problem comes with respect to the economy of the world. As all of us know, there are various critical issues that concern the globe as an ecosystem, and we, the human beings, are only a part of it. If you look at the total biological resources on the planet, they amount to almost 1.8 million species, and we as human beings are only one of them. However, the number and the multitude and the magnitude at which we are multiplying, and we have reached almost 7 billion mark a couple of years ago. The majority of the human species on this planet are not even having sharing of equitable resources. They do not have access to the basic requirements, which I believe is their fundamental right. And therefore, when we are talking about education, particularly in a country which constitutes 1/6 of the world's population and also is regarded as one of the key players in the 21st century by sheer presence of its almost 65% population, which is below 35 years of age, as well as a country which has got capacity and a tradition, a history of over 10,000 years, which is a documented history of knowledge and wisdom, which has given leadership to the entire world in the area of education. And therefore, from the time that we got our independence in 1947 until the time we had the premier institute concerning the higher education in the country, known as Universities Grants Commission, which was established as early as in 1956. Till then, we had only 60 universities operating within the country. And within 1956 till today, in less than 70 years, the total number of universities in India, both private and state level universities, has crossed 1,000 mark. In addition to that, if you look at the affiliated colleges and independent institutions, which are either in research or academics, the total number of them is crossing almost 49,000. However, when we are looking at the percentage of young generation with respect to undergraduates who aspire and who are capable as well as eligible to go for higher education, they are not in a position to go for higher education, particularly at the postgraduate level. And hardly 7.2% of our undergraduates get an opportunity to go for postgraduate studies. The major problem or major limiting factor of this particular situation is the economic disparity, and the parents of these children, who are more than 93.8% of the total population of undergraduates in our country, they're not in a position to support the education of their children. And that is the only reason that in our country we have a tremendous issues with regard to providing education to the masses, to the eligible and able young generation of our country. In today's context, when we look at role of universities in research, development and innovation, I personally look at it from the point of view of a biologist, an ecologist by training, and then as a teacher of postgraduate level education, and of course as an administrator and a policy maker, to the extent that I have had the great opportunity to lead one of the premier institutions of our country, one of the oldest universities in our country, the University of Mumbai, about which a brief mention was made by Mahzabin Madam. You can imagine the dynamics of an institution where we have to control a staff at administration level close to 3,000, and about 30,000 teachers are teaching in the main campus as well as the affiliated colleges of university. With these dynamics, when you look at the higher education scenario and the level at which we are talking about bringing in standards, bringing in competency, as well as bringing in transparency in dissemination of knowledge at higher education, there are enormous number of limitations. And therefore, the presentation that I'm going to make and the oration, the topic of which is role of universities in research, development, and innovation. There is a lot that has been happening in our country and throughout the world. There is always an outflow of young generation after completion of their undergraduate studies, and they always aspire to go abroad for higher education. However, in the advent of COVID-19 scenario, the pandemic which has shaken the entire world, both at economic level and as well as at environmental level, we'll have to redesign and redefine our entire gamut of education system, particularly at higher education level. The government of India is taking enormous steps and a very cautious approach with regard to providing higher education in the current situation as well as the post-COVID situation in years to come. However, the changes that have been brought about due to these pandemics, the approach of this presentation that I'm going to make today is going to be slightly different than what I would have made about 4 months ago. And therefore, I had to really look at various aspects of environmental, social, economic, ecological, as well as technological, to overcome the problems of what the education is going to be in the post-COVID-19 scenario, as well as during this period. How are we going to tackle the education, and how are we going to project those numbers as well as perceptions to our young generation who are aspiring for making a mark in society by way of gaining wisdom through higher education, as well as standing on their own feet. That is what is the purpose of basic education is. With this brief introduction, I also want to mention that the presentation that you are going to see, besides my supporting statements, it is going to be a varied kind of presentation which will involve a role of an ecologist looking at the scenario of research and development as well as innovation, a role of an educationist, a role of a teacher, a role of a policy maker, as well as a role as a institutional leader or a head of university like Mumbai University, who is looking at this scenario from different perspectives. So I'm not talking about wearing different hats, but the experiences that I've had throughout my life, I would like to base my presentation on these facts. If you are talking about the role of universities, as early as 5 decades ago, or in the year 1966, when we were talking about education policy of our country and allotment of funds from our annual budget, because we used to have 5-year plans, and under 5-year plans, there used to be allocation of budget for various activities. And the Kothari Commission provided an impetus for providing a separate budget for education, particularly higher education. And the Universities Grants Commission was one of the main bodies or authorities which was going to regulate these decisions of the government. And therefore, 50 years before today, if we were talking about the role of universities, it was defined in 3 words, that is creation, preservation, and disseminating knowledge. The creation, by way of defining it 50 years before today, was creation of knowledge. Preservation was defined or applied to the concept of providing repository of knowledge. And of course, dissemination of knowledge was teaching and publishing. And therefore, the fundamental focus of all the higher education institutions was, like universities, they should be showing correct path for development of humanity as a whole. However, now when we are looking at 50 years down the line or 55 years down the line, and we are in the year 2020, the role of universities from the point of view of the three concepts has not changed, but the interpretation of these concepts has changed to a certain extent. And in the pre and post COVID scenario, the concept of creation has now come down to research and innovation. The concept of preservation has come down to academic infrastructure. And I would like to mention here particularly in the last 100 years, the entire structure of preservation throughout the world has not changed by way of not going away or deviating from creating infrastructure. So all the institutions, both at academics and as well as research level, have developed solid infrastructure based on which their reputation, their consistency in disseminating knowledge, as well as their excellence has contributed to getting them into different levels of accreditation in the global ranking. And of course, the dissemination of knowledge also is now looking at the perception of students on teaching and learning. How do they really grasp? How do they really get a chance to absorb the dissemination of knowledge at the classroom level by teachers, as well as the various information and communication technologies like Google or internet, where they can gain the knowledge through internet. And also now the recently emerging trend of online education that is also making an impact on perception and also the dissemination of knowledge at students level. Therefore, it is said, and in one of the lectures, Professor Shevgaonkar, currently the Vice Chancellor of Bennett Coleman University, who was also the head of Delhi IIT as its director, he had mentioned recently, and I would like to quote him, who had said that universities should not prepare for the future, but they should actually be molding the future. And therefore, the perception with which we are now looking at R&D as well as innovation, we'll have to look at these particular scenarios. Coming back to the excellence or academic excellence with respect to the world of education today, you look at the various lists which are published by various organizations looking at various criteria of evaluation of academic institutions. And one of the standard figure that comes in most of these surveys that are undertaken, the current list of top 100 universities in the world, which was published recently, highlights United States of America with highest numbers of universities within the top 100, that is 46, Germany with 9, France with 8, Japan, South Korea, as well as United Kingdom with 6 each, China with 4, the Netherlands and Switzerland 3 each, countries like Belgium, Canada, and Singapore 2 each, whereas Denmark 1. I am very sorry to mention here that despite the fact that we have the great history of knowledge dissemination, and we are considered as one of the oldest nations who started educating people. The first university in the world was established in India. We are not in a position now to come to that level of getting into the list of top 100, not only at the world level, but also at the Asian level. However, there is a reprieve that we have one university, or rather conglomeration of universities under the banner of IIT, because IIT has got 23 different locations, and each of the IITs are considered now as universities. However, the ranking of the universities which was made recently, they could not segregate the data published or provided by each of these IITs, and therefore they have considered IIT as a conglomeration of universities as one institution, and that is how it figures in the Asian ranking of top 100 universities as one university from India. In this list, we have China now topping the list, including the 3 universities from Hong Kong, Japan with 19, South Korea with 19, Australia with 5, Singapore with 2, New Zealand with 1. Now we are talking about excellence by way of getting into the list. But are we really satisfied with what we are talking about? Are we really able to provide a kind of fundamental right to the individual or individual human being who may want to go for studies, who may want to go for higher studies, and he's unable to go for it just because he was born in a family where he could not get best of education, best of clothing, and even best of shelters. And therefore, if you look at the scenario as a biologist from the world biodiversity point of view, then you can understand that the 21% of the land mass that we have and the forests which are existing on this land mass support tremendous amount of biological diversity. They actually provide 60 or rather 86% of green jobs to the entire world community. And also from those who are living under the extremely poor conditions of livelihood, over 90% of them, they are directly dependent on forests for their livelihood security. We are talking about economics of forests, understanding the value of forests in national economy. And in a global context, if you look at the role of forests in the national economy, then about 75% of the per capita income through GDP, forests has 75% of the contribution. 92% of the contribution of forests is in the form of employment generation. And subsequently, if you look at exports and forex, we have 59% contribution of forests, 31% contribution in government revenues, and in terms of foreign investments, we have 46% of the contribution of forests. Therefore, if you are looking at the scenario from the biological point of view and the economical point of view, then it will be also necessary to look at the concentration of human beings, which is really concentrated within the 60-kilometer belt from the coastal regions. And this particular map of the world in two-dimensional manner, if you can look at this, the biodiversity of the world is really confined to only 25 degrees north and 25 degrees south Celsius latitude, which is also called as the tropical belt of the planet. However, the resources-rich regions of the world are also unfortunately economically very poor. And it can be seen from the statement made here that almost 76% of the world's poor are also staying in the tropical belt of the planet. The red spots that are seen here on this particular map, these are concentrations of biological resources, which are also called biological hotspots or biodiversity hotspots. Late scientist Dr. Norman Myers, who was an advocate of environmental conservation and who brought in the concept of environmental refugees, which are basically the outcome of economic disparity throughout the world. He had mentioned his particular scenario that 44% of all species of vascular plants, 29% species of birds, 27% of endemic mammals, 38% of endemic reptiles, and 53% of endemic amphibians are basically seen in these red spots, or these are the biological diversity spots, where such a large percent of endemic species of various forms is observed. And so when we are talking about the longevity of human beings, the survival of human species, and the way the multiplication of numbers with which we are growing, it is estimated that every 10th year, we are going to add 1 billion population to our planet. And whether we are going to sustain this pressure of population, which is again concentrated within the 60-kilometer belt from the coastal regions of the world. In terms of production of food grains, in terms of utilization of natural resources, and also in terms of equitable sharing of resources, so that you can leave something for the future, leave something for the next generation, leave something for the posterity, is going to the main priority of the planet. When we are talking about knowledge society in today's world, then the knowledge economy and society depends for its growth on the combination and a combination of 4 different factors, which I have highlighted in this slide, which are conceiving knowledge, production of knowledge, transmission or dissemination of knowledge, and use of knowledge in technological innovation. Therefore, in today's context, when we look at the education systems, particularly universities, it is understood and it is imperative that they play an important role in all these 4 areas. When we look at conservation from the perspective of knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, as well as knowledge utilization, then the 5 points on which the knowledge will have to be applicable and implemented for achieving conservation, which will give sustenance to the entire planet and also sustenance to the human beings as one of the 1.8 million species on this planet. And that is the only way we can contribute to arresting the loss of biological diversity, as well as making planet available for all the species to survive in posterity. The 5 points which I have mentioned here are innovative use of technology, which is a mix of communication tools, providing local specific demand-driven dynamic information in the vernacular language, because locally, if the people don't understand the language of science, the achievement of conservation in terms of preservation and utilization cannot be done. Linking science with society, here the linkages between the experts with rural communities, the role of local people in conservation of biological diversity comes into picture. The fourth point is addressing livelihood security issues in a participatory science communication method, that is lab to lab, lab to land to lab, and land to land. When the Green Revolution took place in India and in the eastern part of the world, thanks to the political will of our then Agriculture Minister, late Shri C. Subramaniam, the financial will by one of the most eminent bureaucrats, Shri Bhutalingam, and the scientific will, which was led by none other than Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is also called as father of Green Revolution. The livelihood security issues came in at a time when we had produced enough within the 4 years of Green Revolution period for India. And in those 4 years between 1965 and 69, we had produced more than 4,000 times of grains which was produced by India in the preceding 4,000 years. And therefore, when we are looking at prerequisites for conservation, we will also have to look at capacity building of rural communities and also identifying and providing or applying value to the informal innovations that these communities are practicing for ages with regard to conservation and sustainable utilization of biological diversity. The 5 points which I had reiterated that there is some research needs to be done. The research conducted by my colleagues and myself right from the beginning when I started my research about 3 decades ago and then started my career at M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation. Some of the initiatives that we took, they were in the form of what we call as anticipatory research. And the points on which I have given highlights in 5 different aspects. The first aspect is innovative use of technology. The technological innovation by way of satellite imageries and interpretation of satellite images for various, providing an early warning for various natural calamities like cyclones or heavy rains or even to the extent of tsunami, where the coastal communities, if trained in interpretation of this innovative technology like satellite imageries, then it is possible for us to provide an early warning to the communities which are dependent on natural resources like sea for their entire livelihood. The second point is available knowledge. If we can convert into the local format, that is the local language or vernacular language, with the help of modern tools, the tools of information and communication technology, and the tools like handheld or mobile phones that we talk about in utilization for every little purpose in day-to-day life. Their effective use can help us in not only identifying ourselves in the oceans with respect to our geographical position, but also not crossing the limits of exclusive economic zones when we go for fishing. At the same time, for the local farmers, the interpretation of information with regard to the problem that they face in their agricultural crops can be disseminated through mobile and through video conferencing. Experts can provide opinions as well as solutions to these farmers online by setting up a particular time frame, and the people can be utilizing this knowledge for overcoming the immediate problems that they face on day-to-day basis. Linking with science with society is another aspect that I had mentioned. And the photographs mentioned here are the research that was conducted by us at the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation, whereby the agricultural scenario, as all of us, the India India's population is directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods. But it is also a fact that about 70% of women are involved in all the agricultural practices that are carried out, including the crossing of particular parental lines in the field and planting and transplanting and so on, including harvesting. The picture shows here a mechanism by way of which the communities are practicing traditional agriculture, as well as the communities know about the entire surroundings of their village and the neighboring areas, and they can map that region, what we now call it as biodiversity register. And one of our great ecologists, Dr. Mahavir, who had floated the concept of preparation of biological diversity register with the help of local communities, was indirectly a salute to the traditional knowledge that is passed on from generations to generation, and communities are able to hold idea as to how the disaster management plan also can be developed with the help of biodiversity registers. The large-scale plantation in the areas which are either degraded in the coastal regions or those which are barren at present but have potential for a forest cover like mangroves, the involvement of local communities for providing livelihood security as well as providing them as an option to conservation of the forests that they are going to regenerate, and also utilization of the affiliated resources, like for example the mangroves which are seen being planted by the local communities. They have been given complete right not only for their preservation after they come up, but also utilization of affiliated resources like fisheries and certain associated plants and animals without harming the natural forest that is going to come up by way of their efforts in terms of mangrove forests. Last but not the least in this is capacity building and also the anticipatory research that we carried out in the advent of what we today about global warming. It is now becoming a reality. The research that we started in 1989 on identification of candidate genes from the saline tolerant plants which are called mangroves, with only 97 species of true and affiliated or associate mangroves throughout the world. The genes identified from these mangroves helped in development of transgenic rice, which became a salt tolerant species, which is also one of the associated species of mangroves that came in handy for handing over the particular technology to the people post tsunami in eastern part of India, where in Tamil Nadu the salt tolerant rice was planted by these communities, and it proved that the knowledge dissemination in the advent of anticipatory research can also be very useful in development of R&D technologies. Talking about next phase of this presentation, there is a knowledge society and how the new expectations have emerged from knowledge societies. Alongside the fundamental mission of initial training, universities should also cater for new needs in education and training stemming from the knowledge-based economy and society. And the 3 points that I would like to highlight here are an increasing need for scientific and technical education, opportunities for lifelong learning, and close involvement in community life. With regard to the expectation of people from education, if you look at the scenario global in the 21st century, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years, then Europe it can be seen that almost 27% of Europe's population has crossed the age of 65 years. So their generation is now fading away. Little less number of young generation which will come up and take the responsibilities. About 30 million more manpower will be required in Europe with respect to the job opportunities. And therefore, a country like India, where in 21st century we are regarded as the youngest nation in the world, we have tremendous opportunities if you are in a position to train our young generation, not only in the formal education, but also the informal way of educating them by inculcating and developing skills within them, as well as making them ready for taking the challenges of 21st century. If you look at employability of university graduates all over the world with respect to what Indian scenario is, then the countries in Europe, if you can see, almost 34% of university pass outs are employed in various entrepreneurship organizations like researchers in Europe. Germany employs about 26%, Spain 55% of university graduates. Industries in Greece employ about 70%, and 80% of university graduates are employed in Turkey. However, in Asia, only 11% of the university graduates who pass out with good numbers and ranks are employed in Asian entrepreneurial organizations. In India, despite the fact that we have a tremendous young generation force in the 21st century, as well as enormous number of universities, our gross enrollment ratio is 26%. And therefore, the situation in India is that only 2% of our graduates or postgraduates in industries in today's context. And therefore, how do we transform university with respect to the research and development as well as the innovation part? With respect to research and development, we'll have to begin a change within ourselves, and we will have to what we call it as break the boundaries. There are enormous number of faculty, different subjects in which different departments are there, but within and outside these institutions like universities, we will have to break the boundaries. That is going to be the key word of today. Inside, as I said, many schools or departments are established, but we will have to ensure that they are converted into interdisciplinary centers of education. And people from different disciplines will have to come together to offer not only formal degrees in education, but also develop skills as well as options for core as well as optional subjects that students can opt, no matter which faculty they originally belong to. And therefore, in addition to the inside change that we are talking about, the outside departments also will have to be looking at the industries and government working together and involving the young generation who are taking formal education in universities in that manner. The technologies that are basically going to drive the transformation is shown in this manner, in this particular slide. And in terms of innovations and activities in research and development, which are highlighted here, are in the form of technologies that will drive major economic and societal transformation. And they are highlighted here, which are mobile internet, automation of knowledge work, the Internet of Things, cloud technology, advanced robotics. And on the right hand side of this particular slide, you can see a bar chart which highlights the range of sized potential economic impacts of all these technologies. The further slide also highlights these technologies in the form of autonomous and near autonomous vehicles, need generation genomics, energy storage, 3D printing, advanced materials, advanced oil and gas exploration and recovery, as well as renewable energy as some of the technologies that are going to drive major economic and societal transformations of today's world. In terms of transformation of power of research, how do we look at it? How do we really translate groundbreaking knowledge in a real world impact? I would like to highlight an example as models developed by industries as well as the universities to cater this particular topic or theme. And therefore, with regard to innovation in research and development, organizations like Microsoft, which I am highlighting as a model, they have two channels. One is R&D wing, research and development wing, which deals with technology transfer, that is experience and devising. And also it deals at external level, that is large number of external partners that they involve in their research and development by involving university faculty in their online R&D programs. It is very important that we undertake fundamental research at university and research institution level, because without which we will not be able to provide solutions for the future. We are also talking about a new gamut of artificial intelligence. And in this particular gamut, we have to focus on vertical innovation, data analysis, work with vertical leaders, to make real world impact. And that is what Microsoft is doing. They are furthering this particular concept by helping universities to develop curriculum, which is the key for their success. And they are talking about how do we really prepare students for industry needs. You must have heard that various organizations, including Microsoft, they have to give you an induction training to the professionals that they highlight and train them for a period of about 3 to 6 months. And that is the investment that they make in the human resources, which are fresh pass outs from universities. However, if you are able to develop curricula at the university level itself involving industries, then the problem will be minimized and the investment time and money in the human resources which is employed by these organizations can be minimized. It can also be looked at developing open source and online certification opportunities while they are going for formal education in higher education institutions. And this certification can help them getting equipped for working with industries as soon as they pass out from universities. We will have to also inculcate, which Microsoft is now practicing with their own employees as well as the collaborating institutions or universities, that they are encouraging computational thinking and they're collaborating with outside universities for this particular purpose. The next point that comes out from this model of Microsoft, how do we really foster culture of innovation? How do we really achieve the impact of culture of innovation through R&D? We'll have to build programs at the undergraduate level by developing project-based learning for undergraduate students. We will have to bring in various disciplines together, like the universities abroad, which offer education in different faculties at the undergraduate level itself, which is a 4-year program for them. But here within 3 years, we can experiment on those lines. And we'll also have to identify the constructive failure individuals. That is, we'll have to formalize this process by bringing students from ideal environment to the point of breakup. When these students are given projects, we should expose them to a situation where the conceptual thinking in terms of success in the research projects cannot really be achieved, and they will have to face certain challenges while performing those projects as internship or as a final year project. And that is when they will be encouraged in a great manner to work on crazy ideas which they have, but they are not able to share because they feel they are outside the gamut of formal thinking and formal education. So how do we really foster the culture of innovation? We'll have to also make resources available for low risk projects so that students at the undergraduate and postgraduate level can experiment, and we should provide them free space and allow them to pursue their crazy ideas, as I mentioned earlier. And also, we'll have to do a lot from top down by way of instilling values, the general guidance with respect to making sure that we must have a constant dialogue of top-down ideas, and also make opportunities, create opportunities to students by providing new ideas. We'll also have to bridge gaps between science and economy, that is the gap between university and business, by creating an independent institution if possible to focus on this particular aspect. Certain universities have developed innovation centers recently with the active support and participation of central government in India under the grants from RUSA, that is Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, and the Ministry of Human Resources Development is taking appropriate steps in ensuring that the higher education is able to reach the masses. Whatever we do in this regard, we will have to look at developing the needs through the framework of acceptable guidelines. And that is where the syllabus and the development of curricula comes into picture. We are now talking about innovation, the aspect of innovation and emergence of new expectations. Alongside its fundamental mission of initial training, universities must cater for new needs in education and training stemming from the knowledge-based economy and society. This can be achieved by evolving an increasing need for scientific and technical education, creating opportunities for lifelong learning, and also have close involvement in community life. how do we really have application of your work for societal development? And that is how we'll have to view your innovation. The definition of innovation itself can be like this, which is a mechanism to overcome challenges of social, environmental, and economic nature. How do we achieve a trinity of achieving ecological efficiency, economic sustainability, and social equity by way of providing solutions to the world in the 21st century? We'll have to share knowledge with partners. We'll have to provide importance to leaders in innovation systems. And the leaders should be those who will create more leaders and not followers. We'll have to encourage such leaders. We'll also have to cut across institutional boundaries and develop a common agenda for achieving sustainability and also innovation by way of providing R&D as inputs. We'll have to also find more pathways which will be innovative for sustainable development, ensuring normal societal functions. And the reforms at teaching level, the conventional teaching is necessary. It will not fade away. But the teachers who are opting for that will have to adopt for the new technologies that are coming in handy for dissemination of knowledge within and away from classroom teaching. And therefore, if you look at all these points, then the role of universities, which can drive innovation in 4 different aspects, are highlighted here. And they are fostering entrepreneurship, encouraging collaboration with private sector, promoting diversity and inclusion. And the 4th point is exploring the nexus of technology and society. The innovation economy can be driven by the universities in a very effective manner. And at a global level, if you look at academic technology transfer in numbers, then the numbers are just given here by way of this particular diagram. And if you can look at during the last 25 years till 2015, almost 1.3 trillion US dollars worth amount has been contributed to US gross industrial output. About $591 billion have been contributed to US gross domestic product, that is GDP. 4.3 million jobs are supported by technology innovations generated by academia. About inventions with respect to the disclosed inventions, about 380,000 innovations have been disclosed. United States alone have provided 80,000 international patents within the 20 years from 1995 to 2015. The other numbers are mentioned here with respect to innovations licensed. About 70% of the innovations generated from university or academia have been licensed. And also 200 plus drugs and vaccines have been discovered in the 2-decade period from 1995 to 2015. I want to give one more example of innovation and how effectively this can be looked at and viewed from the point of view of involving our own students in India for making an innovation where they will actually be able to stand on their own feet after formal education. And what the University of Singapore has done in the last 2 decades, beginning 2001 onwards, they have had a very systematic approach of intake of students, training them at different levels, exposing them to the university's ecosystem, as well as sending them abroad to learn from practical experiences of various institutions at industry level, as well as innovation level, as well as startup level. And here they have been able to effectively manage their population with respect to their intake. Here I just want to highlight a few points where they have intake of students with regard to intake from various disciplines, and they prepare themselves for constructive failure. It is known that in Australia, if you want to join armed forces, then they prefer students who have undergone challenges in their lives, challenges in their academic career, as well as challenges with respect to dealing with society, their own existence in society. If there are failures encountered by them in this particular period, then they are preferred for enrollment or for intake in the defense system of Australian government. And that is how the mechanism works. Unless you face the failures, you will not be able to find solutions. When everything goes smooth, everything looks very rosy. So the National University of Singapore, right from 2001, has adopted this particular approach. They train the people who they take in at a entry point. They develop ability within them to take risks, to strengthen their own path. They also encourage the social entrepreneurship, and they also expose the students to research projects of innovative nature. As I said, from 2001, they have identified 7,000 students every year, from which they are selected and sent to 10 different offices of Silicon Valley, 3 which are in the North America, 3 are in Europe, 1 in Israel, 2 in China, and 1 in Indonesia in Jakarta. 300 promising students from these 7,000 are sent to Silicon Valley for entrepreneurship. They are also identifying about 2,400 students from the same lot of 7,000 students which they enroll at the entry point. Since the last 15 years, they have been exposing them to go abroad, and there is a program called University Overseas Program or NOC program of NUS, which these 2,400 students are exposed to, which involves 1-year internship with a startup company, which is the first shift during the daytime, and with an additional time in the second shift, these students are encouraged to undergo technopreneurship with partner university, which for the National University of Singapore is Stanford University. This model in tapping innovation potential in Southeast Asia is also their major focus in the coming years, because they believe, and it is a fact, that out of 650 million population of South and Southeast Asia, about 300 million population, they have mobile phones, they have gadgets, which basically has a tremendous potential, as all of us have seen in the advent of information and communication technology revolution. And therefore, in the immediate future, the NUS proposes to build innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems for networking with universities in South and Southeast Asia. By mentioning the models like Microsoft or National University of Singapore with respect to R&D as well as innovation, I would also like to highlight some of the threats and how do we really overcome these threats which are there for innovation in the current scenario. The innovation in the universities is based on the knowledge of the faculty members who have been constantly researching and also collaborating with the industry. The major threat is these faculty themselves, because if the universities are not in a position to encourage them to go beyond their formal teaching assignment and also opportunities to learn besides their professional inputs with the company, it will be very difficult in coming years to hold these faculty members from switching over to the private companies or private sector research institutions. Therefore, it will be very important for us to encourage them for furtherance of their education, furtherance of their knowledge generation, and by way of this, we can ensure their longer association with the universities. There are certain faculty at entry level which may not have a doctoral degree with them. So they can also be encouraged either on deputation or by enrolling them in an area where their collaborative research with industry can be taken up as a PhD topic. And by way of bringing in diversity and inclusion, by providing encouragement to gender, the ratio of gender in the university system, we will also be able to encourage the gender ratio by way of which more and more women technocrats as well as women academicians will get opportunity to excel in academia. After mentioning all these things, the general scenario as well as specific examples in R&D as well as innovation, I would like to highlight the current scenario of pandemic of COVID-19 and how are we going to tackle the problems. There are several questions which come to the minds of our own students who have asked a very basic question, whether the UG research and academics will become redundant and whether the students will study academics online and directly move to research. It's a very fine concept and very encouraging situation if you are able to study at home, rather online, entire syllabus that you study in the classroom. Of course, partially you'll have to attend your practicals and interaction sessions and then enroll in the university for only conducting research. Well, my answer to that question is straight no, because learning on your own beyond a particular limit is very, very difficult, because the deep learning what we talk about is very, very necessary to be accompanied at quantum level. And that can be accrued only by interaction, only by actually attending the classes, interacting with your own colleagues and teachers, and solving the difficulties and the problems that you have in your mind. They can be actually posed to your teachers and solutions can be accrued. And therefore, it is also a fact that students cannot be just a specialist in one area. And that is where the classroom teaching is going to be very important, because the core courses as well as optional courses that can be offered by universities will come in very handy for them to understand and gain wisdom out of higher education. And therefore, they will have to be a member of society. They cannot be studying in isolation. When they are in an ecosystem of higher education, they will be exposed eventually as a part of their research, as a member of the community. And they will have to develop links while they are getting educated. They will have to develop links or create links to become part of that particular ecosystem. It is also important that we understand that learning at classroom level, learning by interaction, one-to-one or within the groups is very important, because that learning cannot be provided by Google or any internet provider or any system at remote level. And therefore, how do we really develop technologies to teach? There are many players in today's scenario who are opting for online education. Many institutions are towing the line of it, but it will have to be partial. It cannot be complete replacement of classroom teaching. That we'll have to keep in mind. And therefore, we will have to go beyond providing formal knowledge and develop innovative technologies based on our past knowledge. We boast ourselves as a nation which had the first university in the world. But what happened to that knowledge? Whether that university continued, whether the education has been passed on from generations to generations, whether do we have IPR, whether you can actually acknowledge and reward the informal innovations accrued from the traditional base, whether we can blend traditional technology with modern technologies. These are the questions which we will have to answer. And therefore, if you have to make future universities sustainable, I am coming to the last part of my presentation. If you want to make future of universities sustainable, then as I mentioned and reiterated, we will have to involve industries to design syllabi that would have both fundamental education and research, which is a key component of university curricula. We'll also have to imbibe critical thinking among students, and we'll also strive for an attitude which till recently was in the form of inform first, then influence, and then inspire the young generation like your students. We'll have to reverse this particular trend, and we'll have to inspire them initially by way of your knowledge, by way of interacting face to face in the classroom. We'll have to influence them with your knowledge base as well as appreciating their knowledge. And you'll have to also look at informing them after gaining this particular confidence in the minds of young generation. Therefore, if you want to make universities sustainable, the further 3 points I would like to highlight is to create graduates who can cater to the needs of companies. We'll have to make computational thinking, which I had mentioned in one of my earlier slides, such as artificial intelligence, as a part of a non-technical course, and define curricula accordingly. And last but not the least, imbibe lifelong learning philosophy in higher education of acquiring knowledge, upgrade, and continue to evolve. If you're looking at an agenda in the post-COVID scenario, or I would call it Agenda 21, the agenda of higher education in the field of research and development as well as innovation in the 21st century, where we have already completed 2 decades, but still we are not in a position to meet the challenges posed by United Nations, which we call it as a Millennium Development Goal. There are 8 points, and most of them are integrated very closely with respect to human species and their association with surrounding environment, with surrounding ecosystems, and how do we look at respecting the other biological resources and ensure that these resources are equitably shared, not only with respect to the environment and the interaction, but also with respect to the people who do not have access to utilization of these resources. And therefore, the universities will have to work in the new area as well as new era in the post-COVID situation and also in the 21st century, where we'll have to prepare students for a rapidly changing job market and prepare them to be the architects of the world in which we live. We'll have to help students to adapt to disruptive technologies. And we have Nicolas Negroponte, who has been an advocate of developing this theme and concept of disruptive technologies by ensuring that the new economy works for everyone. And last but not the least, we'll have to succeed. And for succeeding, we must ensure that talent from the diverse global community has access to opportunity in the new economy. We have one of the great personalities, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who along with Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi was regarded as the 100 most influential people in the 20th century and one of the 20 most influential people from Asia in the 20th century. In the 21st century, he gives a message to the world with regard to what we talk about is global or gross domestic product, the GDP, which defines the success of economies of various nations. But if you look at role of India 500 years from today or before today, India was contributing to 20% of the GDP, a global GDP, 500 years before today. But in the year 2000, when that assessment was taken, it was revealed that the United States of America has been now contributing to more than 20% to global GDP. And how this transformation has taken place. The economies that have grown by exploitation of natural resources and by exploitation of knowledge base from the developing world, and the developed nation have always been in the forefront of commanding position in the form of increase or contribution to global GDP. But what is equally and more important probably, as is now been proved, that the gross national happiness, the versus between the GDP and the gross national happiness has been very aptly reiterated by the father of Green Revolution, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who once, when interviewed by the Star TV as early as in 2011, he compared the GDP with the gross national happiness. And he said, and I quote, even if we can't quantify happiness as precisely as we currently quantify GDP, perhaps it is better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong. And this is the concluding statement that I would like to use for concluding my presentation, and also look forward for a global cooperation and a sustained collaboration within the universities in India and abroad, where we can work as a global community for overcoming the problems of not only pandemics like COVID-19, but also the challenges that are posed by environmental concerns for achieving the Millennium Development Goals. And therefore, if you want to achieve ecological security, economic efficiency, and social equity, we will have to toy with the formula of education equal to future, which is the smallest formula or smaller than the E is equal to MC square formula. And Dr. Mashelkar has reiterated with the help of this formula that education is future. And that is where I would like to conclude my presentation. I would like to thank the organizers, particularly my friend and one of the visionary chancellors that I have seen in our country as well as anywhere in the world, Dr. Mahbubul Haq, who with his impeccable ability of bringing people together and working in the remotest regions of our country, the Northeast region, and bringing in people together, providing them vision as well as providing them a chance to stand on their own feet, develop fantastic characters by providing high-class education. I would like to thank the entire team of University of Science and Technology and also the participants, the viewers of this particular event who have given me an inspiration to convey the points that I wanted to make by way of my presentation. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, sir, we have got a host of questions from our participants. Sir, एक दो question हम ले सकते हैं?
जरूर, please.
Sir, like दो तीन questions ही हम मतलब we have tried to scrutinize. एक तो sir, first we would like to ask you, sir, do you feel that our university laboratories and computer infrastructure is adequate to meet the changes that you are advocating, sir?
Yes. Yeah, basically what has happened now is that the infrastructure that we have developed over the last several decades, you take example of universities abroad, for example, in United States of America. People are looking at the infrastructure and going there for face-to-face education. But the situation today that we are all in, like COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 scenario, the advent of the technologies as well as the industrial revolutions that are happening at the very speedy pace, that is every 10th year we are having next revolution coming in. And therefore, in the advent of these developments, we will not be only depending on the infrastructure. Yes, we require an infrastructure for providing quality education, but we will also have to depend on collaborations where such infrastructure is there. We need not repeat that infrastructure in our own institution and expose our students by way of outsourcing them to these excellent institutions where education is available in different faculty, which we are not providing in our own institutions. And by way of that, I have meant that the infrastructure is not the only criteria which will be a deciding factor in future education.
Sir, another question. Actually, sir, put by a participant. Sir, in the post-pandemic situation, a different skill sets will require, like the skill set will change. So your take on it?
Well, the skill sets, and our Honorable Prime Minister had mentioned that you have to make in India, you have to have digital universities. And if you're talking about Make in India, Skill India, then we will have to ensure that our youth is exposed to the skill sets that are already available in our own country. I remember during our days when we had completed our SSC examination, some of my friends wanted to opt for an admission in industrial training institutes, what we call it as ITIs. And they were the institutions which were offering skill-based training. They were all merit holders. They were all 80%, 85% merit holders in SSC exams or even in 12th exam. But instead of going for a conventional engineering program, they opted for ITIs. And some of them, by acquiring skills in ITIs, got immediate jobs in industries because they wanted to go for jobs because of their economic situation. And today, remember, after getting into the jobs, after a few years, their own companies, they actually gave them an opportunity to go for higher education and enhance quality of their education. So they went for formal engineering because those days, part-time engineering courses were also available in various engineering colleges. So by acquiring skill sets within 2 years, they got a job, and few years later they went for enhancement of their academic qualification, which gave them an opportunity to go at a higher level, higher up in the ladder at professional level. So what I'm trying to say here now is those ITIs, I'm sure in each district there is at least one ITI developed by state government, but they have become redundant to the current aspirants of higher education. Why can't we affiliate ITIs to the universities? And if the degree programs, though not offered by ITIs, if you have certificate programs, if you have diplomas, if they are validated by the universities and ITIs are affiliated to the universities, I'm sure many students who do not get an opportunity for going for higher education will opt for these skill-based programs. And that is why the Skill India, the dream of our Honorable Prime Minister, can become reality in shorter period of time.
So, sir, you are saying that there is, academia has a very specific role to play in the post-COVID socio-economic revival of the developing countries, sir.
Well, I would not call a very limited role. I would say the role of academic institution is going to be multifaceted and also enhanced in multiples. We have a greater responsibility now because we all know that education is going to be the only way by which we can sustain the problems of population with respect to the environmental calamities or economic situations of the world. And that is where I feel that the universities will have to diversify in their approach of dissemination of knowledge. So it is not restricting the roles of universities, but providing them an impetus by way of encouragement from MHRD Government of India and enhancing their capabilities, enhancing their role, widening their role for reaching larger segment of population, which is in need of higher education.
Sir, one last question because of the time constraint. Actually,
Yes.
we would like to ask your opinion on this. One of the participants has asked, action research is needed for sustaining ecosystem. So your take on it.
Right. Yes, action research is required, but I would say anticipatory research is more important. If you visualize an impact of a calamity that is foreseen, but it can be a unforeseen situation. If you are able to visualize that impact of a calamity, which may not happen today, like global warming. We were talking about global warming not before 1985-86, when only at global level in 1987, we had Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that was established. But for the first one decade, after it took over various research activities, nobody was believing that global warming is actually going to take place. But ultimately, the IPCC, which was chaired by one of our visionary scientists, Dr. Pachauri, the IPCC was given the Nobel Prize of Peace. So what I'm trying to say is that action research is very, very important, but that will have to be undertaken by looking at the problems that the world is going to face in future. So anticipatory research-based action research is the need of the hour.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I would now like to request Dr. Rashmi Sankakoti to kindly, our faculty from USTM, to kindly present the vote of thanks. Rashmi.
Yes.
A very good afternoon to respected Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, sir, former Vice Chancellor, University of Mumbai and Professor of Life Sciences, Mr. Mahbubul Haq, sir, Honorable Chancellor, University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya, Dr. Mridul Hazarika, sir, Vice Chancellor, USTM, Professor Sohail Savi, sir, Vice Chancellor, USTM, panelists, participants of today's webinar, ladies and gentlemen. In the beginning, I would like to express my profound gratitude to our resource person of today's webinar lecture, Professor Sanjay Deshmukh, sir, for sharing his knowledge regarding today's topic. As we know that research and development has been proved to be a crucial factor in moving the world technological frontiers, while at the same time facilitating new technical and scientific innovations. Sir has explained very well how important it is to have quality of university research, innovative use of technology, linking science with society, etc. that can play a very important role in the society. He has also explained the role of university head, the role of educationist regarding creation, preservation and dissemination of knowledge in this COVID-19 crisis time. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for your very interesting and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you, sir. I would also like to convey my heartfelt thanks to our Honorable Chancellor, Mr. Mahbubul Haq, sir, without whose support we would not have been able to organize this series of webinars. Sir keeps telling us how universities are an increasing important component of the society for scientific innovation and technological advances of a country. Moreover, he is always motivating us in these days to believe that the proliferation of internet-based education has opened access to education to a wider population through real-time online classes, series of webinars, etc. Thank you, sir, for your continuous guidance to conduct this webinar for the benefits of participants at this crisis time of global pandemic. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Mridul Hazarika Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, USTM, and Professor Sohail Savi Sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, USTM, for giving us moral support and continuous guidance to conduct this series of webinars. I would like to thank Registrar, Academic Registrar, Deputy Registrar, Director, Student Affairs, OSD, USTM, and to all the faculty members of USTM present here for their support and participation. I'm extremely grateful to all the panelists present here for smooth functioning of the webinar. Last but not the least, I'm very grateful to all the panelists for attending this webinar. I'm very sure that all the panelists have learned many new things regarding today's topic, role of universities in research, development, and innovation. It is true that in last 2 decades, there is a fundamental transformation of the universities as wonderful teaching institutions into a combination of teaching with research. I would be failing in my duty if I don't convey my thanks to all the administrative and technical staff for smooth functioning of this webinar. My sincere apology to anyone whom I might have missed to thank. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashmi Rekha. Sir, we are really honored. आप हमेशा हमारे guide रहे हैं, हमारे mentor रहे हैं, and you are also one of the person who has pushed us to do better, to perform better. और हम चाहते हैं, हम जानते हैं, नहीं चाहते नहीं, हम जानते हैं, आप हमेशा हमारे साथ रहोगे. आप guiding us, mentoring us, sir.
I am honored also for this great association, and I look forward to working with you and assisting all of you to reach your desired goals. Congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And dear participants, we will meet you in the next installment of the USTM lecture series, the 5th lecture, which will be organized on the 23rd of June at 11 a.m. We'll have another eminent academician, Professor Jayashankar sir. He'll be joining us at 11 a.m. We will be seeing you then, and request all to kindly fill the feedback form by tonight, midnight tonight. Thank you, sir, and good day to all.
Thank you so much,
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.